Good morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we have some major headlines to discuss today, but interestingly enough, none of them have anything to do with any comic book cinematic universes. Yes, other franchises in Hollywood and other studios are fighting back to try and create alternatives to, of course, the comic book franchises that have come to dominate not just the news cycle, but also the box office. Jurassic World showed that it could be done, but then, Star Wars, I guess Star Wars isn't a comic book movie either, actually, come to think of it. So you've had two huge comic book movie successes last year, also three, actually, when you count the Fast and Furious franchise, which we'll be discussing today, and so that gives hope to the non-comic book properties. So, as I said, we're going to talk about Fast and Furious today, and that's our first story, and that's Fast 8, which is fast approaching and fast coming together. Now, you might recall that when Furious 7 came out, Helen Mirren was like, I'd sure like to be in a Fast and Furious movie, and Vin Diesel talked about her potentially coming on as like the Shaw matron, right? The mother to Jason Statham and Luke Evans' characters. That doesn't seem to have come together. They've decided to go with a little bit of a bigger name, and it looks like they're really working hard to get Charlize Theron to sign on to be the female villain in the 8th installment, which I think is a fantastic idea. She, of course, did a wonderful job in Mad Max Fury Road, and while it's not quite her own franchise, I think being able to play the female villain in such a big other franchise, I think is a step up. I think it's an upgrade. And I think it's very exciting for her. And she makes a wonderful villain, as we all know from the Snow White and the Huntsman movies, where she is pretty much the only watchable thing on screen. I have a little higher hope for this sequel that's coming up, but in the trailer, she still seems to be the best in the bunch. So what's interesting about this is that F. Gary Gray is, of course, directing Fast 8, coming off of Straight Outta Compton. But as many people are pointing out, one of the first big movies he directed, mainstream, was Italian Job, which, of course, starred Charlize Theron. It also featured Jason Statham, interestingly enough. So F. Gary Gray will have a little bit of Italian Job reunion there. And that, of course, was also a car movie. And it was a very good car movie, by the way. If you have not seen the Italian Job, starring Mark Wahlberg as well, a whole wonderful cast of actors, actually, you should rent it. Stream it. It's quite good. Now, I saw some people in the comment sections for this story on the internet say, well, what about Angelina Jolie? But I think Charlize Theron, coming off of Mad Max Fury Road, is a little bit more of a hotter commodity right now. And I think that, I think everyone's seen Angelina Jolie do that, but I think Charlize Theron playing a modern villain would be something that a lot of people would be very interested in. Also, here's where I think things get even more interesting. Fast and Furious is known for being a very diverse franchise. They check all the ethnicity boxes, and it's proved to be very helpful to them at the box office and with their fan base. But with the loss of Paul Walker, they have a situation where they've kind of lost their Caucasian checkbox. And I think that, this is a very good way to solve that issue, to create a very strong female white lead villain, and then you don't have to, obviously replace Paul Walker. I think it would be weird, there was some talk about having Paul Walker, one of his brothers, take over for him, but it'd be like, hey, we're a really tight crew that's come together over the course of 7 movies, but hey, this random white dude's now going to hang out with us because we need him. I mean, I don't think it would be organic. I think it would make the franchise not seem quite as good. So I think this is a good way to solve that problem and make sure it continues to be diverse. So that's interesting. We're getting to a situation, I think, in Hollywood where you're like, man, we need some white people in this movie. So I guess you can say in some ways a lot of progress is being made. I know that it's nothing compared to the other problem, but still, it's an interesting situation to see this franchise in, and it shows how truly modern it is. I think it's a wonderful idea. I hope she takes it. I've seen a couple of people say it's a bad idea. I think it's a great idea. Don't forget that Fast and Furious 7 joined the $1 billion club. A lot of people said that was due to Paul Walker's tragic death. I'm sure that was a factor, just like Heath Ledger's death factored into the success of the instant becoming like mythos for The Dark Knight. But I think that undercuts the popularity. I mean, these movies made hundreds of millions of dollars before Paul Walker's tragic death. And I think when you bring in the Mad Max Fury Road superstar Charlize Theron, I think it puts it in a good position to do really well as as a follow-up. We'll see. Also, Kurt Russell's in the film as well, so they're doing pretty well. All right, so let's move on to the second story of the day, which blew my mind. Now, Universal is very keen to get their Monsters cinematic universe up and running. They, of course, are famous for their monster movies. Back in the day, early days of Hollywood, they did, they had The Mummy, they had The Invisible Man, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman, and then later on, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which joined that lineup, that official lineup. So Universal is very eager to get their own monster cinematic universe going to compete with all these other cinematic universes. And I think when you first hear about it, you think about Van Helsing, and the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies were very good when they came out, but they seem a little antiquated at this point. You really wonder how they can compete. And then you see the casting that's coming together, and you get excited. But then you remember that Alex Kurtzman is in charge of this, and then you get less excited again. He is somebody who helped J.J. Abrams kind of like torpedo the Star Trek franchise after getting it off to a very good start. But we'll see. We'll give Alex Kurtzman the benefit of the doubt, and I think it will be hard to mess up this casting. So, the picture that's already come together is The Mummy, and that's going to star Tom Cruise in The Mummy, and it's going to be a modern-day film where he comes across the mummy, who will now be a woman, which I think is very interesting, played by Sofia Boutella, who was in Kingsman: The Secret Service as Gazelle, and then is also in the upcoming Star Trek Beyond movie as that, albino alien chick. So I think she's very good, and I think she's very good at roles that, have like, very strong visual component. So I think she'll be a wonderful mummy. I'm very excited about that. And I think that that's a very exciting property right there. But then it gets even more amazing because it was announced yesterday that Johnny Depp has signed on to play the Invisible Man, which I think is absolutely hilarious. He's taken it to a new level. He always hides behind mustaches and silly accents, and now he will just be a silly accent. I think this is a very good role for Johnny Depp. I think it's the kind of property that he could do quite well in. He could also do quite poorly in it. I think Johnny Depp is super hit and miss these days, and the audience knows it. So we'll see how the project comes together, but I think the idea of eventually all these characters will team up in a single movie. So the idea that Tom Cruise and Johnny Depp would be in the same movie together is absolutely astounding. Also, it puts the franchise in a very good position to hire the rest of the Monsters cast because you get to be in a movie with Tom Cruise and Johnny Depp. So they have to still cast Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. And hopefully they'll get even more diversity in there and more star power, and they could create something that's very exciting and feels very modern. I'd like to see, one of those roles at least go to a different ethnicity, the lead roles, and then one go to a woman, because Sofia Boutella, I don't know what kind of mummy she'll be, but we'd like to get maybe like a more of a marquee character being female as well. But that's very, very exciting. And if I were any actor in Hollywood right now, once hearing this news of Cruise and Depp, I'd be like, see if you can get a hand on some of those other Universal monster treatments, and let's see if we want to make a play for any of them. So I'm curious, does this sound good to you, or do you think it's a little too old school? All right, now, speaking of change in Hollywood, the Oscars is going to have a very big change this year, which I actually think is wonderful, but we'll see how it works out. So it was announced that the Oscars, in an effort to have more interesting speeches, has decided to tell everyone to submit a thank you list in advance. So when you win your award, if you win, you don't have to thank anyone because it'll go across the screen in a ticker tape, which I think is fantastic. And their argument, the producers said at the Oscar luncheon, was, hey, if you just say the name, whatever, but if it goes across the screen, it's written, people can read it, they can take a picture of it with their phone, or they're hopefully DVRing the ceremony. But I thought that was an interesting pitch. But I do think that the Oscars and all awards shows really need to become more about a really meaningful speech. And that's what the producers said. They said, this will free you up to say something meaningful when you're up there. And I think those are the speeches, of course, that we all remember. And I think that, and also, it'll keep people from getting in trouble, like Sylvester Stallone for not thanking Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan. He can be like, it's written down, I don't have to worry about it. Or poor Hilary Swank, who forgot to thank her husband at the time, Chad Lowe. Or Anne Hathaway, of course, also did that at the Golden Globes, forgot to thank, I believe her husband. So I think that it would be, I think, something that would save a lot of celebrities from embarrassment and would also make for a more interesting and compelling awards ceremony. I mean, everybody knows who you want to thank. You want to thank everybody who helped you get the, it's tough. It's tough because while everybody knows who you want to thank, you don't want to be the only one not thanking your representation and the people who helped you get the part, because then they'll resent you and you won't get any more parts. So it's very difficult. But I would love for people to say more meaningful speeches. I think it would make the show a lot more entertaining. But now the pressure is on to come up with a meaningful speech. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on them. Let's get to the viewer question from Shuzlin Reader, aka Nick. So Nick says, Grace, I know you've done this for producers and actors. Interestingly enough, someone said you didn't do it for actors. So I'm waiting for clarification from that BTT viewer for what exactly they're wondering about actors to answer that question. But anyway, Nick continues saying, but could you dedicate a viewer question spot to explaining how one would go about becoming a writer in Hollywood? I love your channel and watch every day. You inspire me so much. Thanks, Nick. That's very inspiring, Nick. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think it's wonderful that you want to become a screenwriter in Hollywood. I've actually heard from a number of BTT viewers recently who are considering a similar career, so your question comes at a perfect time. All right, so it's very difficult to break into Hollywood in any job. So I think that I'm glad to be able to give you a few tips on what to do if you want to be a screenwriter. Now, this is for movies. TV is a little different, but I'm just going to focus on movies because this is a movie news show. So the best thing you can do is to study screenwriting. There's 2 courses of action, and you can do both. One is to go to school and to a film program and study screenwriting. I think that's anyone who wants to be a screenwriter should, of course, for instance, William Goldman, famous screenwriter, has written a wonderful book about screenwriting. Also, you should just read as many screenplays as you can. I think that's incredibly important. But also, I think so, and they're very easy to get at bookstores, or certainly you can order them online. But what I would recommend is that you study screenwriting at school. Make sure you have a backup, always have a backup. You don't think that you're necessarily going to have to do that backup career forever, but it should be something that perhaps might be able to sustain you while you try to become a screenwriter. It's not going to happen overnight. So you go to school, and if you go to a good screenwriting school, like, one of the film schools, Los Angeles is always a good place to go because then you're already in Tinseltown. But, agents should be looking for screenwriters there. You'll make connections, hopefully, from your professors, etc. All right? Then the other thing that you really should think of doing is applying for grants and writing programs. They have quite a number of them these days. Disney, for instance, is famous for their writing program, where they actually hire a number of people from that program to work on their properties, film and television. For instance, Megan Lefebvre, I think, who wrote Inside Out and also worked on Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, no, I think it might be Nicole Perlman, actually. But there's one of those writers came from the Disney writing program. And look how well she's doing. So that was very, very helpful. So you want to apply to a writing program at one of the studios. You can just search for writing programs, Hollywood studios. Then also there are writing competitions, which you can also submit to. For instance, the Academy has the Nichols Fellowship, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and that can help you significantly if you get if your screenplay gets some kind of placement in that fellowship. That they have a couple of places that they give out. You can also put your screenplay on the blacklist. You have to pay to do that, but I think it's a worthy investment because Hollywood producers actually go on the blacklist and look for stuff, so that's not a bad thing to try either. So what you want to try and do is you want to try and win one of these contests, you want to try and win a fellowship, and then you want to write to an agent. Hopefully they'll be looking, but you can always get on their radar by sending them a postcard, or a little note and just saying, I won this award, or I've accomplished this. Would you be interested in looking at my screenplay? Don't send anybody a screenplay unsolicited. It will get you in major trouble and it will only end up in the garbage. So it's really a waste of your time and resources. So you should have a screenplay ready. You should always have a couple of screenplays ready for if someone asks you. So what that means is you should have a full, at least 1 or 2 full screenplays written as an example of your work, and they should be different types of movies. Don't just write the same thing. And then you also want to maybe have a treatment or 1 or 2 treatments to show that you can do that. I would also tell you not to write a screenplay for an established property. I think that is going to majorly hurt you and make you look unprofessional. You need to write an original idea, and don't adapt someone else's material if you don't have the screen rights to that, because it's going to just annoy the producer or agent that you show it to. Come up with an original idea, and also I would recommend that you maybe you could have one big budget idea, but you should have one film that's inexpensive to produce, because small producers are more likely to take a chance on a new writer than big Hollywood producers who have their pick of any writer in town. So you want someone who's looking for the next big thing and is willing to take a chance on an unknown to find it. And that means that person does not have a lot of money to make a movie. So you need to make one and write one. And also, if you're a really good writer, you want the writing to stand out, you should need a huge flashy budget because the writing should be what's the most impressive. I would also recommend that you find screenwriters that you really like. A lot of writer-directors started out writers, for instance, Quentin Tarantino, and just kind of get an idea of how their careers started. Nobody's career starts the same way, but it'll give you ideas and a realistic look at how you can break into the business and help you manage your expectations. Then also plan for a long haul. Hopefully, some people will get started right away, but you need to understand that it can take a couple of years to break into the movie business. Make sure that you're making progress. If you're not making progress, I'm not saying you should quit, but you need to reevaluate your tactics. So you need to be making some progress, but then you also need to have a realistic expectation for how long it will take, so that you can do it and you can marathon it. One of my favorite quotes is that they used to ask Harrison Ford. They said, "You came to Hollywood with a bunch of friends, Harrison Ford, yet you're the only one who became a movie star. Why do you think that is?" And Harrison Ford said, "I'm the only one who didn't leave. Everybody else went home, and it took him 11 years to get Star Wars." He had a couple of parts here and there, like on TV and stuff. That's what I mean about some progress. But overall, he had to support himself being a carpenter, and that's actually how he ended up meeting George Lucas, doing work on his office. So really good story, very interesting. And that's another good thing. Network, network, network. Get yourself to Hollywood or get yourself to New York, meet people, or London if you're in Europe. London, of course, is a very big screenwriting area, a movie making area. Network, make connections so that when people need a writer, they think of you. All right, I hope that was helpful, Nick. Best of luck. Break a leg with your aspirations. I'm rooting for you, and I hope that was helpful to anyone else who is considering a career as a screenwriter as well. And also remember, it's never too late. A lot of people change careers at any time in their life. You just have to make sure, again, that you can support yourself while you're trying to do it. And, anyone can pick up or open their laptop and type up a screenplay that could potentially be something that is a game changer for both them and maybe even Hollywood. All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. That's today's episode. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question. Any advice you might have for Nick, any of your own experiences for those of you who might be aspiring or working screenwriters right now, and then, of course, any questions that you might have. All right, thanks for watching.